morning. Hi, everyone. We're Abuna's giving communion to someone, so he's not with us right now. But I think for the most part, he knows what's in the presentation. If you don't mind, if you're sitting like far, if you want to come just a little bit closer, like stay 2 meters from me. But if you want to come closer, so I can see your faces a little bit better, it's harder with a mask. Thank you. Okay, so today's talk is about how to support youth during a mental health struggle. Just by a show of hands, who here has like a teenager? Okay. Uh, like more children, like young kids, younger kids. Okay. And young adults, or like maybe Sage Up, or okay, so mainly like high school and thanks, Dad. So maybe like high school, elementary a little bit. The talk is mainly going to be for teens. There are slight differences that I'm not an expert in for children, but we can still talk about it. If you have any questions, feel free to ask me. If I don't know the answer, I'll tell you I don't know, and then I can do some research. We can get into contact and talk about that. But a lot of like the theory part is relevant to everyone, to be honest. Like we're going to talk about mental health and how to support youth, but honestly, it could work for anyone, your sister, brother, your coworker, a colleague, whatever it is. But I will tailor it more for your children and what they can go through. So don't hesitate if you have a different opinion. Obviously, I'm not a parent. I'm sure you have a lot of tips and tricks that work for you, and I'm sure if you share them with other people, that will be beneficial for everyone. So feel free if you have an opinion, another point of view, a question. It's okay. We have a mic over there. Just use that so we're streaming it so everyone can actually benefit. Okay. So who here can tell me what mental health is? I'm starting with the basis. I thought a lot about what I should put in that presentation. I'm like, I don't know, there could be so many things, but I chose to just stick with the basis so everyone has the same base and we start from the same point. So who can tell me what mental health is? Yeah, can you use the mic if you don't mind?
I'm not sure exactly either, but I would say it has to do with your emotions, emotional health, psychological health.
Yeah, emotional health, that's part of the answer. Anyone else? Yeah.
Okay, in my perspective, that's a lot of things of physiological, mental, body, and mind. There are many things under the mental health.
Yeah, body and mind are connected, your psychological well-being. Great. I'm glad I didn't hear stuff like depression, anxiety. This is great because most of the time, or maybe like 2 years ago, everyone would say depression, anxiety, schizophrenia. These are mental illnesses. We're going to talk about that as well. But mental health is what you said. It's everything that has to do with our thoughts, our emotions, and our behavior. So that means that everyone has mental health. So this is different from having a mental illness. It's everything that goes on in our brain, in our mind. So the mental health is not black and white. It's on a spectrum, and everybody's on that spectrum over here. So it goes from healthy to stressed, to struggling, and to crisis. The healthy and the stress part, what we do here is self-care and go to social support. Our social support is also parents, it's friends, it's teachers, it's servants. So when we're on the healthy part of the spectrum for our body, let's start with our body so everyone knows what it is. So you're feeling great, you don't have any particular symptom of anything, everything's going well. So it's the same thing with our mental health, we're just overall happy, everything is going well. If we're stressed with our body, that can mean maybe having a headache. So that means we'll just go and take a Tylenol, go take a nap, and then we'll be able to go back on the healthy part of the spectrum. What does it look like when we're stressed with our mental health? So maybe that could mean we have a test that's coming up and we're a little bit stressed, but we're able to go, I don't know, see the teacher to help us with a specific math problem, or we go talk to a friend. If we have a conflict with someone, we go talk to a parent about it. So we're able to do things ourselves. So we're able to do self-care and go to our social support so we can go back to the healthy part of the spectrum. Now, where I put the arrow here for right before struggling and crisis, that means that all of the self-care and social support that we're used to doing, we're used to getting help from, it's not working anymore. So this could look like, like a kid who's struggling with a specific subject at school and they're very stressed about it all the time. It affects their grades. They're not sleeping well. They're very anxious about it. And so just going to talk to the parent or the teacher is not working, and they're just stuck in this struggling part. Or it could look like they're being bullied at school. So they're always struggling with their social interactions. Obviously, this is affecting their grades, how they're eating, how they're sleeping, their social well-being is not well, their psychological well-being is not well, so that's struggling. So this is where we need professional help to help us get out of that rut, right? And the crisis means that we're at imminent risk of harm for ourselves or to other people. So here we're talking suicidal thoughts, suicidal ideation, suicidal attempt. We'll talk a little bit more about what that means, but just know that crisis absolutely needs professional help. It's basically a 911 emergency. So now for the mental illness. So mental illness is on a spectrum as well. And mental illness, basically, it's just taking a bunch of symptoms and that would make depression, or a bunch of other symptoms that would make an anxiety disorder, or another bunch and it's an eating disorder. So it's just a diagnosis that we have when we have specific symptoms. And that as well goes from having no mental illness to having a severe mental illness. And it's two different spectrums. So they're two different things. So that means that it's not because we're on the crisis part, so on the poor health, on the mental health spectrum, so vertically, that we're never gonna have, that if we're having a severe mental illness, it doesn't mean that we're always going to be on the poor health. So we're not always in crisis because we have a mental illness. So it could be someone who has schizophrenia, but they're taking their medication, they're getting therapy, everything's under control, they don't have any active episodes, so everything is going well. So they do have mental illness, but they know how to take care of it, their mental health is going great. On the other side, maybe we don't have a mental illness, but a specific incident happens in our life, like we lose a loved one, and then we get into a crisis. We start questioning life. It's really hard to take charge of it, to control it. So we might end up in a crisis even though we don't have a mental illness. And as well, we could have a mental illness and then still be struggling with the symptoms. Is that kind of clear? It's kind of like a complex theory, boring. Do you guys have any questions? Yes.
If someone is suffering from a type of mental illness, such as maybe attention deficit disorder or high anxiety, which is not controlled or anything like that, can they also suffer from some sort of a shock or trauma in their life? And if so, how severe is that in their case, because they already have like a predisposed medical condition?
Yeah. So if someone has like ADHD and then they live with trauma in their lives, is that going to affect them? Of course. So everyone has like, depending on your genetics, depending on your environment, it's a lot of factors. It won't be just because of the ADHD, for example. But yes, this will look different for everyone. The trauma is going to look different for many, many factors. Yeah. So if you do have a mental illness, it's the aim is to get a recovery and to know how to maintain an optimal mental health. But it could actually affect your mental health. So having a mental illness could affect your day-to-day mental health, that's for sure. But once you are in recovery and you know how to manage it, then you know how to look for the cues. If someone, for example, has anxiety and they know the cues it's in their body, for example, like breathing really fast, so they know what to do. They've learned, I don't know, like relaxation, breathing, so they're able to use it right away. And then they're able to not go in a struggling part of their mental health, for example. Is it clear? Any other questions? Okay. So let's actually take a moment and see what mental health struggle looks like, because now it's kind of like vague. And how can you actually recognize it so you're able to be there for the person who's struggling with their mental health? So a mental health struggle is gonna be basically changes. And it's changes in what your kid is going to say, what they're gonna feel, what they're gonna do. So the feeling part is kind of tricky because they might not show you what they're feeling, but in things that they say, if they start talking negatively about their body, for example, oh, like my legs are too thick, and we know like eating disorders for teenage girls is very high. And so, for example, if they start talking negatively about these things, and it's like, where did you get that from? It doesn't necessarily mean that they're struggling, but it could be an indicator that they're struggling. So these are things that they're saying. Or they're saying, oh, I don't care about basketball anymore. But they've played basketball for, 7 years or something. And it's like, why that sudden change? So it's something that's really out of the blue kind of thing, or it's like a big change. Maybe it's just part of their development. They're just tired of basketball. They want to try other things. But it could be also indicative of mental health struggle. Things that they do, the changes are, for example, they don't eat as much. They don't sleep well. They've had really good grades, and now their grades are not as good. They have trouble focusing. So, and for the younger ones, it could be acting out at school. So it could be like violence with other kids. That's not normal. So these are all things to look for, especially for the younger ones. It's a lot in the behavior. So doing things that they're not used to doing. It's not in their personality. So these are all changes. And those changes are going to be intense. So could be an intense low, like they're isolating themselves all the time, or it can be an intense high. So they have a lot more energy than they used to, and this is not their baseline. And you're going to be the ones to actually notice these changes because you know them best, and you know what's normal and not normal. And then it's going to be long lasting. So we say 2 weeks is basically the time where if it's been 2 weeks like that, it's time to maybe see if it's a mental health struggle, seek out for professional help. And it's going to be a big impact. So as I said, their grades are going down, they're not eating as well, their self-image is not as high anymore. It doesn't have to be all three, it could just be one or the other, but just pay attention to those changes that you'll see in your kid or anyone around you, really. And these are going to be your cue to start having that uncomfortable conversation, we could say. Any questions? I feel like you all have your kids in your mind and I can see it in your eyes. So if you need a break, it's okay. I know it might be a little bit tough. So try to just breathe. These are normal, and also going through a struggle doesn't mean you're always going to be in that state, and they're lucky to have you. You're going to be there for them. Yes, go ahead.
I don't know if you will talk about this today, but I wonder if some of this has to do with social media and devices in general.
Yeah, I was probably sure someone was going to ask about that. With social media, it's, there are the ups and downs. What happens with social media is the constant social comparison. So we're always comparing ourselves with what we see, whether it's physically, whether it's lifestyle. For me personally, I think I tricked the algorithm to only show me videos of dogs. I'm not really comparing myself to dogs, but it's maybe being open with that conversation with your kids on what they see as content, what they think about it. Not necessarily saying stop looking at accounts of fashion or sports, and it's just having that conversation saying those people really curate what they're putting on there. That's not actually real life. And a lot of them are paid, and a lot of Photoshop is going on. So it's just seeing what they think of social media. They might tell you yeah, I know it's not real, it's just for fun. Or, it could go the other way saying, but I really want to look like that. What I've heard about social media consumption is the best way is how you use it. So if you're constantly on your phone or your laptop, they're going to do the same because you're the first example that they're going to follow. And it's always an idea of monitoring the consumption. So not necessarily restricting. I know a lot of parents restrict, and I think that's fine. I don't think it's that bad, and it works for many people. But sometimes it makes the kid think this is very precious. So they're always thinking about like Friday night when I'm gonna be allowed to go on Instagram or whatever it is. So it's just monitoring and saying like, I think we've spent a lot of time on social media today. How about we go do something else? So having like those extra curricular stuff outside of social media as well lets them like think that there are other interesting things, and being comfortable with being bored because we're not comfortable being bored anymore, right? But it's actually very beneficial for our brain because it's sort of like cleaning up while we're just like staring at nothing. Our brain is actually working, so we need that time where we're not doing anything to maintain like a healthy brain. Does that answer your question a little bit? Yeah. But we've seen like we've seen like a correlation, like a relationship between eating disorders, anxiety, depression, and social media consumption. So especially for teenage girls, it's a big debate on what to do with it. So I think the decision will be for you on how you want to restrict it, because it also goes with, oh well, all my friends are on it and then they're gonna feel left out. So it's a lot to balance out, but for sure it does increase anxiety, increase depression for everyone really, but especially teenage girls. Other questions for a mental health struggle? Okay. So now let's say that you've noticed those changes. So how do you start that conversation? So how do you basically support that person? So the do's, I'll show you the don'ts. The do's is to be very specific. So it's like, hey, John, I've noticed you stopped going to basketball practice. This is a very specific situation that they can't contest and say that's not true. If you come up and say, John, you've been negligent of like something very vague, or you've been like alone all the time. First of all, that's not true. No one's alone all the time. So be very specific in what you want to tackle with them. So, or it could be, John, I've noticed your grades have gone down. That's not your normal thing. Is everything okay? So it's just showing that you've noticed something, and it could be really small, very specific, that they can't say that's not true. And then that will start the conversation. And just saying, I really care about you. Is everything okay? Do you want to talk about it? And then that's the time to just listen. You can ask questions. Just really be curious, because their reality is obviously different from yours, and it's different from what you've lived when you were their age. So if there's something you don't understand, just ask. Validate their emotions, saying like, yeah, that must be really tough. Math is really hard. It's keeping the focus on them, validating their emotion, asking questions about them, not about you, but we'll get to that later. And again, show them that you care. Maybe they don't want to talk to you. That could happen. They're going to be like, no, everything's fine. And you're like stuck there and be like, well, I can't listen. I can't ask questions. What do I do? So you could just show them that you care with other things than saying that you care. You can, cook their favorite meal, or, keeping that link even if they're sort of rejecting you. I know it's really hard as a parent of a teenager to, take it on and be like, my kid is not talking to me. Like, they're the best thing in your world, and you feel rejected. So it's hard to take that on you. So keeping that link with them. I remember I had a teacher who said her mother would always like put an orange juice for her sister. Like they had a lot of conflict, but she would always, take that orange juice. So having that one thing that they will know that you care about them, because as teenagers or even young adults, you're growing and you want to separate from your parent, and you want to be different, and you don't want to relate to them anymore. You want to relate to your friends, and you're taking on more responsibilities. But you're not actually 100% equipped to actually go on with life on your own. So you still want to know that your parent is there when you need them. So it's just a matter of showing, okay, I don't want to talk to them, but they're there if anything happens, like as a last resort or anything. So don't get frustrated if they don't want to talk to you. Just really just show that you care in a different way. And so that's basically very humbling. So you're not maybe the one that they want to talk to. So what do you do in that case? You show them that you care, but also connect them to help. So say, hey, if anything, there's a psychologist at school that you can talk to. I'll show you like a list of resources that you can tell them about. But basically, give them another option than you. And then tell them, if ever you want to talk about it, I'm here. If you don't want to talk about it, that's fine. But if you want to talk to someone else, there's this and that and that. So not forcing it. When they feel like they have the choice, they'll feel a lot more comfortable to come and talk to you and be like, oh, I'm the one who's going to go and talk to my parent, not my parent is forcing me. Is that good so far? Okay. The don'ts. Be distracted. So if they do talk to you, put your phone away, put your laptop away, your work away, and it's just them because they want to feel important, right? So they don't want to feel like they've had the courage to talk to you about something and then you're just not there, so they're not going to come back. Judging them. If they're talking about something that happened online and you're just like, what is that? It's not even real life. So don't actually say that. Maybe check in with yourself and saying like, okay, it's not the time to judge or say this is not important. They're so young, they don't know anything. Really just be present. So really refrain from judging, giving advice as well, and then expecting them to follow. I don't know how many times my parents tricked me into doing something without giving me advice. Just being like, okay, well, we thought about blah, 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 and then how about we try it? I'd be like, oh, okay, because they're giving me the choice. It's not like you have to go see a psychologist. This is an order. You're going to create a frustration in them. The therapy's not going to go well. You're going to be spending a ton of money, and it's just going to go to waste. So it's always being there for them, following their own rhythm, not pushing them. And obviously, we're not talking about a crisis here, so just following their own rhythm is okay. We're going to see what we can do in a crisis, but just being present, listening, asking questions, validating their experience, like this is really hard. I know it's really tough with your friends right now. Is there anything I can do? Stuff like that. And then just maybe thinking, brainstorming solutions with them, but not actually imposing them. Is that okay for the do's and don'ts so far? And this goes for your spouse, for anyone in your family, just being present and not forcing them to do something. Okay, so a mental health crisis. So we said this is an imminent risk of harm to oneself or others. If someone is having suicidal thoughts, it doesn't mean that they're set on acting on it. Sorry, I'm trying to keep the conversation as safe as possible for you also, like it's a heavily charged subject, but it just means that they're in a lot of pain and there's a lot of ambiguity, but it still means that they are high risk of acting on it. So how do you actually recognize if there's a mental health crisis? If someone is telling jokes about taking their own life, I'm not saying if they're making jokes that this is what it is. I'm just saying that this could be a sign. So what we do here is like, hey, you just made a joke about, saying like no one cares about you. Is everything okay? And they're going to be saying, yeah, it's okay. Everything's fine. But you at least ask the question. So if you see someone saying like making those kind of jokes, I think it's worth it to go and investigate. So saying things like no one cares about me, I can't take it anymore, no one would care if I'm not around, these are suicidal thoughts. And these should be taken very seriously. I'll tell you how in just a bit. If you see a huge change in their routine, so if they were isolating and then suddenly they're going out every single night, something is not right. And it's like, you'll notice what it is. Like suddenly they're dancing and I don't know, the music is really high. So these are all signs that it could be that sense of like relief that they found a solution. So now that brings them a lot of a sudden change in being in a happy mood. And also if you notice that they're giving away their possessions because they're not going to be around. So these are all signs to look for youth and for adults as well. So if you notice these things, the first step is to ask direct questions. Talking directly about suicide is not going to put that idea in someone's head. It will just, it's just a safe way to make sure that they're safe. So do you have suicidal thoughts? Do you have a plan? Have you thought about taking your life? These are all direct questions. They're tough to ask, but you need to ask them to make sure that the person is safe. If the person says yes to any of those, don't leave them, especially if they're saying, like, I have a plan, it's like on this and this day. Don't leave them at all, but also don't take in charge the situation because you're not a mental health professional. So in that case, you absolutely need to get support. So it's either 911, Suicide Action Montréal. You can call for someone else. I'll give you the number at the end. That's Sam. Or the emergency at the hospital. And you can also ask the person, what would you prefer? Do you prefer that we go together? Do you want someone else to go with you? So they feel like it's also like not imposing on them. And also this can kind of be like a hard process. So check in with yourself, see if you're okay with it. If you need some extra support, go and get it from a therapist, a doctor. There are many resources that we can look into. But I really want to, like asking the questions is very crucial because the worst you can do is you're just going to upset them for like 2 minutes, and then at least you'll be sure that nothing is, no one's in danger. And obviously if they tell you like, no, I don't want to go to the hospital or whatever, this is the time to actually force them to go to the hospital because they're going to just be thankful at the end, even though your relationship is kind of, I would say more negative in a time, but they're going to be thankful for it later. And keep in mind as well that they might be scared of if you, like what you would do if you knew that they had suicidal thoughts. So maybe they're draining it that you are going to be mad at them or they're going to be grounded. So maybe having that like extra love in the process would help. So as I said, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be acting on it, but it does indicate a lot of pain behind it. Any questions? You're very quiet as a group. Thinking, you need a minute to breathe. Honestly, we could tackle what you want because these are like the bases that I wanted to give you, but for the resources, I've just put a bunch here. So a family doctor, a pediatrician. At school, they have a lot of resources as well. So if they have a social worker, a psychologist, if they want more of an anonymous help, they have Kids Help Phone, so they can chat, text, or call. You can go on their website. And if you're looking for other resources around you, you can go to Kids Help Phone resources around me, and you put in your postal code, and they give you all the resources that you can have in your area, so you can choose and pick and choose. Check your insurance as well, because see what your insurance covers, what it doesn't cover. This could be very helpful instead of waiting in the CLSC or the public sector for like months and it's like way too long. So check if you have private insurance that could cover a psychologist as well. And then there's Suicide Action Montréal, so the 1866 appel. This is the number that you can have. You could also go to suicide.ca and they have a chatting and text option as well. That's fairly new. So these are pretty much the resources that I know. Maybe you know other ones. And don't hesitate to switch if you see that it's not working. Because maybe that person that you're there for, you notice that, they go to their therapist, but nothing really is changing. So maybe it's the therapist they're not clicking with them. Maybe it's just, they don't like talking to someone they don't know. They would rather maybe just take medication from a family doctor and talk to you or talk to a close one. So there are a lot of options, and it's not because one didn't work that they're all bad. Like even within psychologists and therapists, they all have different approaches, and they obviously need to click with them because it's another human being. And the psychologist and therapist is not going to tell you what's happening in the session. That's just to keep the relationship between them and the kid intact, because if there's a mistrust, then it's not going to work out. But you can still ask them questions about what they're doing. Maybe depends on what they're willing to tell you, but you can still see for yourself what the fit looks like. And also keep in mind, if they're 14 and over, they can go give them their consent on their own. So even work on that. So say like you're almost 14 or you're 14, you can make your own decisions. I'm here to help you find a solution with you. So you can give them that kind of boost of confidence, because it's usually like a lower point in their life, but working on that boosting is going to help as well. Any questions? Yes.
I have heard some parents say that they're reluctant, to seek psychologists. It's a very taboo subject, and also the topic of having to take medication, to treat some sort of a mental illness or a struggle. And I've heard him say that they'll grow out of it. Expecting things to kind of like go along naturally, and eventually the person is going to bounce back. But there's also adults who are suffering from this illness and have not yet, come out of it, or haven't been really met by a professional. What do you say to parents who are reluctant or on the fence? They don't want to start the process. What do you say to parents like that?
Yeah, I think you said the word. I think you said the word stigma. So we have a lot of stigma like everywhere, and it also comes from a lack of knowledge. So just having that basic knowledge, like if someone asks us what to do to get into better shape, I think we all would have a basic idea of what to do to get into a better physical shape. So we should be able to do the same thing with our mental health. So having a little bit more knowledge about mental health, encouraging them to learn a little bit more about it. Obviously, it's for the psychologist, everything is confidential. Your medical records are confidential with your doctor. There is no like one formula that's good for everyone. Not everyone wants to take medication. I think that's okay. If other people want to talk about it, that's another option. There are many options that you can see. But I think it all starts with just having a basic knowledge of what mental health is, what mental illness is, and just having that open conversation with your kids as well. It's like, do you know what mental health is? What do you do to take care of your mental health? And just having that open, because I feel like younger people are more open about mental health than older generations. So maybe like showing that you're open to that as well. So saying like, hey, I had to talk about mental health. I thought that was really interesting. What do you know about it? What do you actually do? And that will show them that you can be a person that they can trust and that they can go to. Does that answer your question?
Well, if I can add maybe something for Sharif and for others. I think I'm a teacher, so I do get parents that don't want the kids, they don't believe that their kid needs the help. So I think the first part is to maybe open to a teacher or to a parent, another parent that you're comfortable talking to, okay? And you'll notice you're not alone. A lot of parents are not alone, and their kids have an issue and they need to talk to them. And what I tell parents is this: if you need glasses, are you going to deny? If your child needs glasses, are you going to deny your child of glasses? You're going to go get him glasses, right? And when he gets glasses, he will see better, obviously. So mental health help, if it's medication or whatever, it's just going to help and actually increase the self-esteem of the child, et cetera, and do better at school. There are so many good things about it. But it just starts with that, who can I talk to? Don't be afraid. If you don't want to talk to a parent, you can talk to the teachers. We are all knowledgeable about these things.
Yeah.
And the kids would get help at school as well. They would be entitled for this extra help. So, and there are so many people that are successful that have mental health problems, so.
Yeah, I loved your parallel with the glasses. So I think that's what's most helpful is like to always compare it to the physical health, because everyone can relate to that. So just opening with that conversation, be like, if you had the flu, if you had COVID, would you just like not tell anyone?
Yeah.
You would go and seek out for that help that you need. So I think that's a very good parallel. And having that person of trust, seeing other people that have struggled, because we all have a mental health, so we're all gonna struggle at some point. We're gonna have tough times. That's okay. So it's the same thing if we all have a body. We're all gonna get sick at some point. It's just part of it. And as you said, just seeing other people who are successful, it doesn't mean that you're always gonna be stuck in that crisis or struggling or mental illness. You can recover, and everything's fine afterwards. Yeah.
I did come here also for something else I want to ask you about. Is their relation with COVID? It took a big toll, I feel, on the teens. COVID and their mental health. Is there anything you know about that?
Yeah. So if we're talking more research and data, then there is, especially the ones who were struggling even more because of COVID, because they didn't have access to the resources. But also for everyone, it was mainly the social isolation that was really tough. And also now going back to school is stressful as well. So be aware of that. I also wanted to mention it as an example, so thank you because I forgot. Um, so because they might be afraid of the virus, or maybe, you were following the rules very strictly and then the kids at school, they're not following it that much, other kids. So this could create a little bit of anxiety. So always make sure that they're okay with it. If they're struggling, that they can also seek for professional help at school, especially. It's very easy access. It's lucky for them. But it's always like rationalizing it, but sometimes it doesn't always work for the kids because it's so in their head. But having that conversation with them, reassuring them also. And if you feel like it's not working, then seek out for professional help. A lot of people, the demand in mental health has spiked a lot during the pandemic, and that's kind of normal. And it could spike again because now we're going into a new reality where we're like closed but not closed. And the virus is there, but we're like socializing and everything's normal. So it's kind of normal to have this anxiety regarding COVID. So just make sure if you can get professional help in that case, that would be great. Yeah.
Hi, thank you so much. You are covering too many topics that probably we won't be able to cover in an hour. We are talking about children and teenagers. I want to shift gears a little bit and ask you about the parents. I think there is a cycle of denial, acknowledge, acceptance that parents will go through it before accepting that their child has a mental health issue and they want to seek help. I wonder, what are your thoughts about this? How parents can recognize that this is not the usual burnout, this is not the usual behaviors that we see every day. I know you touch base for some red flags, but how they can help themselves to really acknowledge, accept, and seek help for that. Thank you.
It's a good question. I feel like it's going to be different from everyone. And I would say, again, the basis is just having the mental health knowledge. So being like, okay, no, this is real. And you know how people would say it's just like a teenage phase, everything is going to be okay. I would say treat everything as you investigating if it's a struggle or not. Because at the very least, you're just going to notice that, well, it's just them like struggling with the idea of them being independent and them just being still a child. So I feel like that's the main thing, is to just have more knowledge. And accepting it is working on the self-stigma inside. So maybe working on saying that's okay if I'm struggling. That's okay if someone else around me is struggling. It's part of it. So it's just normalizing that. And I feel like it's not only like the parent who has to work on it, it's the whole community who has to be more open. We have to talk about it more freely. And talk about people who have gone through it as well. If you know another parent that their child was struggling, that could be an indicator as well. And what you want is to get the help as soon as you can, because a lot of people are just stuck in that, oh, it'll just resolve on its own. It's not that bad, but it's better to be safe than sorry, basically. It's a very good question, but it's very complex. I feel like it's work on different levels. Any other questions? You feel okay? Yeah. Yeah. It is important, yeah. At school you're very busy doing other, like, you have a lot of fires here and there, and you're just okay. That's great. Yeah. The as like a yeah, as health. That's great because in my time no one did that. So it's still, so as we said, like the stigma, we're slowly working on it, and then it will just become more and more normal, and then more and more accepting that someone is struggling, and then we need to get help for that person. Any, was there a question here? No? Okay. I forgot to write my email, but if you want to take it down, if you have any questions, if you need help finding a resource, I can give you my email as well. It's Julie, Julie dot Zaky, Zaky, at hotmail.com. So if anything, you can just email me and we can chat a bit more. Thank you.